What's going on, Imperials? It's Emperor Cubone here. After multiple decades and hundreds of Pokémon, you're always going to overlook a few. This can be out of neglect, or simply because you have a deep hatred for that creature, but this leaves gaps in your knowledge about certain Pokémon. Just because you know who Altaria is, doesn't mean you know what they're all about. And oftentimes, not always, giving a random Pokémon a chance can make you see a better side of them and appreciate them in a deeper way than the ones that you immediately like just because they look cool. So, join me as we dive in once again to even more Pokémon I've grown to appreciate. Number 6. Forretress. Pineco isn't exactly the most exciting Pokémon to interact with as a kid. I mean, I got Pinecones aplenty in my backyard for my siblings to throw at my head. But this Pokémon is a little different. Maybe if I knew that it was basically a hand grenade, I would have looked at it differently, since Pineco is prone to explosions. I never disliked these Pokémon, but they were just kind of there. Forretress probably would have gone over a little better if they didn't have the sleek Scizor right in the same generation, being a much more enticing Bug and Steel type. And that was pretty much the extent of it for years, until the Gen 2 games came back around on the 3DS Virtual Console. For some reason, after getting Headbutt and seeing the Bagworm fall out of the tree, I decided to keep it around on the team. The high defense was great for the early game, so it was useful for sponging hits. But what really surprised me was that after I had to teach it 2 HM moves in Strength and Rock Smash, that it was still incredibly useful. I had clearly underestimated the physical attack, but even if it couldn't take out foes in one shot, it still had the bulk to soak up hits while chipping away at their heals. And its usefulness only increased when it did gain the Steel typing upon evolution. This Pokémon was meant to be a placeholder, but simply leaving it on the team instead of putting it in the box let it become a staple in the original Johto experience without much effort at all, leading me to carry it to the Elite Four and beyond. But of course, Forretress has been a mainstay in competitive teams for years, for hazard setup or removal, so maybe I should have caught on that there was something more under that metallic shell. Number 5. Stoutland. There are probably some people that loved this line from the start, but I wasn't one of them. Firstly, I am more of a cat person, but I simply wasn't a fan of Lillipup's face looking like it was hit by a piece of fruit. It did fill out a bit as the facial hair with Herdier, but the middle stage has been derided for basically just being a standard dog with little else to it. But I guess Stoutland was fine. There were just so many other Pokémon in the Unova region that I had at least 24 other favorites that I had to try out first. But grinding through the sequels multiple times to get those sweet shiny dragon gifts at the end means that you will eventually run out of favorites, facilitating the need to branch out. So I thought, why not throw a Lillipup on the team? And to my surprise, it exceeded my expectations. Lillipup evolved right around when your regular starter would, and it had pretty decently high attack for that point in the game. And once it got to the fully evolved form, Stoutland proved his value. Being a normal type, he had a vast move pool to try out, such as Crunch, Reversal, and the fantastic Elemental Fang moves. I even tried out Last Resort, which I never bothered using before, but the hugely powerful normal move was worth the strict stipulations with Stoutland behind it. And it could even learn Surf, which allowed it to free up HMs on other team members. Simply put, this dog may be the big-hearted Pokémon, but it's also got 500 points in its base stats and multiple useful abilities to dole out all sorts of varying coverage, and capably become a pillar of most any team in Unova. Not to mention being able to ride one in Alola was doubly useful to sniff out some sweet hidden items, and endearing Stoutland to even more players than ever before, truly making it a trainer's best friend. Number 4. Tangrowth. When looking at the glut of additional evolutions provided in Sinnoh, it's a pretty mixed bag. On a sliding scale of Gliscor, who has an amazing design, typing, and stats to back it up, and brought new life to a mediocre Pokémon family, to Licky Licky, who's an embarrassment to all of creation, Tangrowth trends more towards the latter end. It's not that Tangrowth is an utter failure. I was just never drawn to the simplistic design of, what if Tangela, but more? But I had seen it around a lot on various competitive formats, so I figured I'd at least try it out. And of course Tangela will only evolve once it learns Ancient Power, so that's a nice coverage move that you can keep if you want to help counter all but one of your weaknesses. And it's actually a better fit than you might think, since Tangrowth's special attack is at 110, along with hundreds in HP and attack, and a 125 defense. So there is a reason that competitive players keep this bundle of vines around outside of its Regenerator hidden ability, since it's far bulkier than I ever would have guessed. It was able to sit on the field and take hits that my other Pokémon couldn't, and then it also had health-draining moves, so it rarely had to worry about fainting, despite being what some would consider a lowly grass type. The design still lacks a little detail for my liking, but the Pokémon itself is undoubtedly solid, and was a well-deserved evolution to an otherwise abandoned Pokémon from years ago, catapulting it to unforeseen heights of relevance it only could have dreamed of, and making me glad that it was there to protect my team. Number 3. Dustox. Nuzlockes are a pretty common way for people to shake up the way that they play Pokemon games. I was always hesitant to try it for fear of getting too attached to my party and not being able to bear their loss. But I eventually went for it and did my first ever Nuzlocke last year. After some thinking, I decided to do it on my copy of Alpha Sapphire, since I had only played the game once and wanted to go through it again, but also for strategic reasoning, as the layout of the Hoenn map provides you with 3 different routes almost immediately, affording you the ability to give your starter some decent backup and even get a full team before the first gym. However, predictably, one of those early encounters I got was a Wurmple. Now, I've used a Beautifly in the past and was prepared to do so again, but as we know, you don't get to choose the way it'll go, and this time it became a Cascoon. Now, Hoenn in general has several different early bugs from which to choose, so I had a lot of variety available and never had to try a Dustox until it was forced upon me, but I'm kind of glad it went down that way. Bugs don't necessarily instill great confidence, but Dustox had higher defenses than I anticipated, and held up the team for a surprising amount of the game. Gaining flying and psychic attacks while quad-resisting fighting-type moves let it easily handle Brawly. And gaining special bug moves also let Dustox take care of most of Team Aqua's dark types. Unfortunately, the Dustox did eventually fall due to my overzealous desires to capture Kyogre, and I was devastated to have lost such an unsuspecting staple of the team. Basically, I had friend-zoned Dustox when I should have given it a chance, and didn't realize my mistake until it was too late. I did eventually find a Venomoth on one of the islands to fill that same role, but it just wasn't the same. Venomoth was great, perfect even, for what it was, but truth be told, it could never be more than just a rebound for the moth that I truly wanted. Number 2. Glalie. Honestly, when I first saw Snorunt, I thought it was kinda dumb. It's just some kind of hat? And then when I saw what its evolution was, I was completely baffled. This has nothing to do with the previous stage, except maybe the teeth. You know, the same sort of knee-jerk reaction lots of people have to quote-unquote basic item Pokemon. But sometimes a bad first impression isn't the end. You see, right near the tail end of the advanced era of the anime, Ash Ketchum went and caught himself a Snorunt. On a side note, this was one of my favorite times in the anime because I could actually start watching it again. But the Snorunt they started featuring was full of personality. It was kind of nervous, but also had a penchant for accidentally freezing others when it was happy. And through hard work, it finally mastered Ice Beam, only to evolve into Glalie. Once it evolved, Glalie was far more confident, and for good reason, since it immediately became one of Ash's strongest team members, as proven by how instrumental it was for his success during the Hoenn League tournament. I loved how it was able to fight despite being just a floating head, with a particular highlight being when it teamed up with Grovyle to take on 2 Fire-type starters. Both of them are disadvantaged but still came out on top. The same thing happened when it faced a Metang on its own, reigning victorious when on paper it should have lost. Couple its fantastic representation with the fact that only then did I realize it was the first pure ice type in the series for some reason, and I was more than willing to put one on the team. If you've always looked past this Pokemon in favor of its branched evolution, then I urge you to try it before you write it off. He may not be the hardest hitter out there, but he fills his role perfectly as the king of the tundra. Number 1. Incineroar. When the starters were first revealed for Alola, I was in love with Rowlet. I thought Litten was alright, and I didn't really like Popplio. Not because I was jumping on any hate wagon, that was my honest reaction. However, by the time we reached the end of their lines, the positions had changed. Decidueye was still on top, however Primarina became second and Incineroar fell to last place. I'll just start by saying that I'm not really a wrestling fan at all, so basing a whole Pokemon on it, let alone a starter, was a little much for my taste. I mean, there's no way any rational person would think that's what Litten and Torracat should turn into. And the requisite active flame part was its belt? Really? And it bothered me even more that all of this was clearly pointing towards it being another fighting type, but no, it's a dark type instead. I'm not saying I wanted another fire and fighting starter, but when you look at all of them, Incineroar hands down looks to be the most deserving of it. So on top of not liking Tony the Tiger's evil twin very much in the first place, I was even more disappointed by Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. We pretty well knew that some Alola Pokemon would probably make its way into the roster, but I was greatly anticipating Decidueye. If nothing else, we already had Charizard and Greninja, so I thought we needed a Grass-type one. But it is another Archer character, so I guess I understand. But the only thing worse than stealing Decidueye's spot was using random moves that weren't even real Pokemon attacks, but just some generic wrestling-style movements. But of course, I had to buy the game anyway, and over time I eventually did play as Incineroar. And to my own shock, I started to enjoy it. The heft and power this character had was energizing, and it came off as more of a big goofball than a true heel, despite its intentions. Now, some people might say, well, of course being in a Smash game will make you like a Pokemon better, but that's not always true. Greninja's in the game, and I still don't really like them. Jigglypuff has been in Smash since the very beginning, and I still just find it to be okay. So, Incineroar softening my resolve through heavy hits and a quirky personality in Smash led me to opening to the possibility of using it in the standard game. It just took a while to find the time to travel through the Alola region again. I still think it should probably be a fighting type instead of dark, but I don't know if there's ever been a Pokemon that I thoroughly disliked and then been turned around on quite to the extremes that I've experienced with Incineroar. Which just goes to show, you never know when you might be surprised. So instead of using that Aggron for a 5th time, why not try something different and discover a new favorite? Which Pokemon have you grown to appreciate? Let me know down in the comments. Also be sure to leave a like, share this video, and subscribe so that you too can become an Imperial today. And we'll see you around next time!